picture this. It's 2023. You're a normal dude on your way to work in June. And as you arrive and open your laptop, you see you're being summoned to HR for not putting pronouns in your bio and accidentally dead naming a fellow employee.
How dare you!
Frustrated, you pop onto Twitter just to find you were banned for saying that a man was a man and not a woman.
Wait, what?
So after a long day of sensitivity training, you decide it's time to go home, unwind, and you hit the road, but traffic is dead stop because Main Street is filled with naked men shaking their junk in crowds, surprisingly, with children in them. You finally get home, you kick your legs back, ready to enjoy some Dodgers baseball, just to find that the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence are throwing out the first pitch at Dodgers Stadium. That's not ideal, so you switch over to the news, and you see topless trans influencers running around the south lawn of the White House celebrating Pride Month. You just decide, hey, I'm done with all TV today, I'm gonna sit down, my son needs some help with his English homework. And he runs over, and you find that it's filled with graphic sexual imagery.
If we follow this trajectory, we will all be gay in 2054.
Okay, 2023 fever dream over. Let's flash forward to 2025. As you brace for another tough June, you're met with silence. June suddenly just feels like another summer month. Corporate sponsors have been retreating from their previous Pride commitments. Many corporate logos didn't change to their previous rainbow ones. And the White House has no Pride displays whatsoever. Actually, they declared June Title IX month. Something has changed. The LGBTQ movement has lost their all-encompassing grip on every institution in society. And it's not because Americans have changed their mind. My theory is the ruling class is dead. And I'll tell you exactly what killed it. Americans are a spirited, freedom-loving people. They are a nation that despises being ruled. It's in our DNA. It's emblazoned in flags and bumper stickers, but also thriving pretty quietly out in the suburbs in everyday life. That doesn't mean there isn't a ruling class, but the trick in America is to rule without the appearance of ruling. So like a frog in boiling water, you can slowly dominate more aspects of American life without the frog jumping out. Rome had their bread in circuses. In America, it's Social Security in the NFL. But in 2020, the temperature rose far too quickly. COVID lockdowns shocked the conscience of the average American. School closures, masks, vax mandates, and the ruthless punishments, legal or social, that followed made it glaringly obvious that we were being ruled. A trifecta of government power, mass media, and corporate coercion were used in unison to keep Americans in line and crush dissent. How else would they be able to convince Americans to accept the bizarre origins of COVID, the 6-foot rule, and the effectiveness of the COVID vaccine? Yes, the ruling class in 2020 were very focused on COVID, but also had obvious pet projects, including open borders, green energy, and most important for this video, the LGBTQ movement. At the government level, this wasn't a secret. Joe Biden openly campaigned in support of the most extreme elements of the LGBTQ agenda. What sticks out specifically to me is gender-affirming care for minors, something that literally would be unthinkable, shocking the American conscience just 10 years ago. Pride Month was marked with shocking symbolism, aggressive executive orders, and raunchy White House lawn celebrations. Most obvious to me was the changing of Title IX to include gender identity, something that was quickly weaponized to punish states that wouldn't let boys compete in girls' sports or access their locker rooms. And he certainly wasn't shy about it in his personnel. The HHS Assistant Secretary was literally a man, Rachel Levine. Sam Brinton, famous for stealing luggage, was the head of the U.S. Department of Energy. KJP was his press secretary, now writing a hilarious book saying that she's independent. And also cringy LGBTQ stunts and social media influencers that just littered the White House and all of their social media. But then comes the most important part, weaponization. The government created, then quickly scrapped, the U.S. Ministry of Truth, which literally would have decided what is true and false on the internet. And let's not forget the FBI and Department of Justice. I will never forget in Loudoun County, Virginia, when a trans student had sexually assaulted 2 different students at a school that he was moved to. Parents were rightfully upset and wanted answers. What were they met with? The FBI and Department of Justice labeled these parents as domestic terrorists. States not performing gender-affirming care surgeries were punished at the government level as well, withholding federal funds. They were investigating, quote, hate crimes against LGBTQ. And it also was revealed that the FBI was colluding with Meta, with Twitter, to take down small accounts that were even making jokes or using satire, anything that ran afoul of their status quo on LGBTQ. And that gets to the next point, controlling mass media. Every social media platform would ban you for saying that a man is a woman. And I remember this exactly in a viral debate between Tim Pool, Joe Rogan, Jack Dorsey, and Twitter's chief legal officer.
Going into like Meghan Murphy, for instance, right? You can call that targeted harassment if Meghan Murphy, who is, for those that don't know, she's a radical feminist who refuses to use the transgender pronouns. If she's in an argument with a trans person over whether or not they should be allowed in sports or in biologically female spaces, and she refuses to use their pronoun because of her ideology, you'll ban them.
Again, it depends on the context on the platform. And it's also not banned permanently. Like, you get warnings.
Well, she was banned permanently, but let's be clear about what happened.
But she was warned
explain, because you explained it to me. What did she actually do?
My understanding, and I don't have the tweet by tweet the way that I did for the others, but my understanding is that she was warned multiple times for misgendering an individual that she was in an argument with. And this individual is actually bringing a lawsuit against her in Canada as well. So it is.
So you have an argument between two people.
Again.
And you have a rule that enforces only one side of the ideology, and you've banned only one of those people.
We have a rule that attempts to address what we have perceived to be instances of abuse and harassment.
I
she was
completely agree. It's your ideology.
Right, but it is an ideology, right? If she's saying a man is never a woman, if that's what she's saying, and then biologically she's correct, we obviously have a debate here.
What I'm trying to say is that it's not that you can't have those viewpoints. It's that if you're taking those viewpoints and you're targeting them at a specific person in a way that reflects your intent to abuse and harass them.
But what if it's in the context of the conversation? What if she's saying that I don't think that trans women should be allowed in these female spaces to make decisions for women? And then this person's arguing and she says a woman is biologically female.
Well,
you are never going to be a woman.
She responded with, "Men aren't women, though." And that was her first in the series of events. That's what got her the suspension and the warning.
That was one of many tweets that was part
right.
of providing context, and that was actually the second actually strike, is my understanding.
But why is that a strike?
Yeah, why is that a strike?
But again, like, it's the context of I don't have all the tweets in front of me. There were like 10 or 12 tweets going back and forth, and my understanding is that in the context of all of those, she was misgendering a particular person, not that she was holding a belief or statement.
It was a public figure, though, wasn't it?
I don't know.
It was. So you're having an individual who is debating a high-profile individual in her community, and she's expressing her ideology versus hers, and you have opted to ban one of those ideologies.
Legitimately, every social media platform would remove you for insisting on biological reality. And yes, these organizations certainly have a liberal bent. They're based in Silicon Valley. But what we now know with things being released is that the FBI and Department of Justice were working with these platforms and pressuring them to take down even jokes from relatively small accounts. Now, something that would get our founding fathers rolling in the grave, but it's the only way that they were able to completely enforce mass culture and mass opinion on the LGBTQ movement. We have all this. It's contained in the Twitter files that were released by Elon Musk after purchasing Twitter. And as I see it, it's the beginning of the end of an almost total control over mass media that the ruling class enjoyed. And finally, you get corporate coercion. I definitely noticed this year many corporations that previously changed their logo did not change their logo to a rainbow version. And I've just come to expect this change every year. But this phenomenon was a small part of complete alignment of LGBTQ activists and the Biden-Harris administration to coerce corporations into total support for the agenda. Now, this is done through things like the Corporate Equity Index. It was created by the Human Rights Campaign, a close partner of the Biden-Harris administration. Essentially, it's a social credit score out of the CCP. The HRC weaponized major institutional investors like BlackRock and Vanguard to hold investments hostage if companies didn't meet the LGBTQ criteria. And what are these criteria, you may ask? You get good marks for requiring employers to pay for so-called gender-affirming care, including surgeries and cross-sex hormones, mandatory sensitivity training for employees, permitting men to use women's restrooms in your offices, and diversity quotas for senior management, explicit marketing to LGBTQ individuals like rainbow packaging during Pride Month. There you go. So the HRC actually considers the Republican Party to be explicitly anti-LGBTQ, and any corporation or company official caught publicly supporting Republican candidates or conservative causes automatically loses 25 points on their CEI score. So if you're wondering, why does Uber need to be gay now? Or Anheuser-Busch need to be gay now? Why do pronouns appear in everyone's email? None of this was organic, and it was an economic incentive. So back to Pride. Where did it go? Pride was a creation of the previous ruling class, and it is dead. The death started, to me, at the grassroots level. COVID-era remote curriculums suddenly started to include graphic LGBTQ sexual themes. Men suddenly started to appear in women's bathrooms, and boys started crushing girls in their sports. Teachers were hiding public transitions from their parents, And unfortunately, there was a meteoric gender-affirming care spike for children, including hormones and surgeries. This was no longer a pie-in-the-sky kind of academic theory. These were impacting really normal Americans, everyday Americans, completely changing their lives, and the rage was starting to get built up here. Pair that with pandemic rage, there was something wrong. And now all of a sudden, free speech was opened up on social media for people to voice their opinions and share their stories. When Elon bought Twitter back in 2023, the first crack in the mass media armor was formed. Now there's a place to speak freely, and speak people did. I've seen countless impassioned school board speeches from parents fed up with the system. And suddenly I was reading personal stories from people all over the country, not carefully manicured headlines and manipulated data sets. If you need any indication on the revolt over the LGBTQ movement, the most effective political ad for the last campaign was Kamala is for they, them, and Trump is for you. I mean, yes, catchy slogan, but it hit on Kamala's public pledge to support trans surgeries for inmates with tax dollars. Something she was really comfortable saying when she held the metaphorical gun of media, government, and corporate power, something that sounds patently insane when normal people are allowed to voice their opinions online. Corporations making modest commitments to the LGBTQ movement were crushed by boycotts. Proving my point, Bud Light didn't even put Dylan Mulvaney in a commercial. They just sent him, along with hundreds of other influencers, a bottle with their face on it. But that didn't matter. The pent-up rage developed over the past couple of years was being shot at Bud Light like a laser beam, sending the message that Americans were done being ruled. And of course, completed with the resurgence of Donald Trump, stamped by anti-DEI executive orders. There's a complete sea change in the White House. So here we sit in 2025. Yes, there are still some Pride-themed events still happening around the country, but it is now a small blip rather than a giant in-your-face spectacle, something most of the public looks at with open disgust or silent nuisance. The previous ruling class is dead, and social media will make it much harder to enforce strict adherence to anything, really. But by the way, this isn't a victory. Individualized media feeds and free speech has dissipated the previous ruling class, but it now leaves us with a democratic mob. I really see this materialize in today's debates about what is America. We don't have a shared consensus of traditions, media, heroes, villains, or roots. And so two problems I see with that. One, we won't be prepared when the forming ruling class harnesses AI or media to push the next inorganic agenda on us. And two, the wandering mob isn't united in common ideas or identity, leading to obvious social order deterioration. Is this preferable to the previous ruling regime? Yes. Hiding the president's obvious mental decline, among other things, they have legitimately lost the trust of Americans to rule. But the reality is, we don't live in an anarchy, and someone needs to run the country. I hope the next iteration of that includes less rainbows.